Hey, Pixie, how's it going?
Oh, hi.
Hey.
Close this quick. Can that go?
Yeah, I think you're fine. You're good on my end. What's up?
Yeah, so I've spent the past couple days, figuring out your stance on the
Oh, God.
subjective objective gender.
Yeah,
Um,
how
yeah,
B's that going?
it was
Also,
pretty good.
I appreciate that actually you're taking the time to, like, I don't know, I was, like, legitimately concerned because, I don't know, it's just very, like, concerning to me that, I don't know, like, a lot of the takes I've had for a while. I've already talked about this, but that, like, I've had a lot of the same takes for a while now, and I don't know, I get the impression that I get the impression no one actually reads the stuff that we put out. It makes me very sad. Like,
Yeah.
like, I don't know, you've been in research streams, like, we put the, like I do this shit with the community so that, like, there's some degree of, like, okay, we all know what's up, you know, like, we all get kind of what's up with this.
Yeah, yeah. But is
Yeah.
it in general in left-leaning spaces, everyone takes this idea that to be of a gender is to identify as that gender, kind of for granted, without stopping to think that it is logically absurd and that there is a correct answer instead of that?
Yeah, or at least I don't want to say necessarily like a correct one. I think that correct is on, like, different degrees. I think that we can,
Yeah,
like,
of course.
I think we can always work towards getting, like, more correct, or, like, more
Yeah,
accurate,
there's a
or
stronger
maybe, like,
definition.
more accurate, right?
Yeah.
And I think that, like, we can I don't know. This is like this is the same reason I actually really like ESO and Yu-Gi-Oh. It's kind of like the same mental process of, like, theory crafting, right? Like, there's
Yeah.
probably always a way to be able to improve a definition that we use. It's just, like, the matter of figuring it out, and that's cool. That's like, fun.
Yeah. Like my background, actually, I'm like a student of studying different types of design, including game design. And like one thing I really
Oh.
love is like writing rule books and stuff like that.
Oh shit!
Like
Yeah,
you
no,
could play a
that's
game. Yeah.
awesome.
So this is the thing. I'm totally all in for trying to like logically figure out how to express these ideas. And I could tell there's like some very clear idea there. I've spent 2 days now trying to figure it out.
Okay.
And I streamed, kind of during the day. But even the times when I wasn't streaming, I've been thinking about this like ever since. So like last night, I got all kind of like absurdist, like doomer pilled and all this. Like, oh my gosh, there's no point to any of this. And then today, I think I put it back together again. So
yeah, I remember.
I got it.
Yeah. Like, I remember essentially, like, I don't know. Sometimes you have to stare into the abyss, and the abyss will stare back, and it'll say, "Hi, Mark."
Yeah.
But I mean, like, I don't know. So, like, that's kind of the hard thing about this, and this is the reason why, like, I do think, and I say this, like, endearingly, like, I think that, like, it can be hard for people to sometimes think about this, because, like, if you think about it critically and you aren't able to come to a good answer right away, it can be really easy to get, like, doomer pilled, and to get, like, super, like depressed and abysmal about it, because you're basically wondering, like, oh god, does any of this mean anything? And you
Yep.
like almost fucking, like, lose yourself.
Yeah.
And then but then you're like, oh, actually, like I am of the genuine opinion at this point. Like, here's my genuine opinion that, like, honestly, like, you're like, most people can probably figure out, like, a way to be able to express an idea, or like an answer to a difficult situation like that. Like, there's probably always a way to do it. It's just, like, a matter of figuring out what it is. And that's, like, part of the fun. And I don't know. So yeah, I think that's probably, in my opinion, I think that there's, like, a lot of good answers here. Not necessarily, like, an objectively correct answer, but a lot of really good ones that people can pick and choose depending on, like, what they want out of it. Yeah. So,
and I've noticed in some ways your answers are very specific, but in other ways they're like purposely very vague as to accommodate all possible answers, which is very clever.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, that's definitely intentional, right? So I mean, like, it's important. Like, like, I don't know, like, when we're defining, I don't know, sometimes you learn about a concept and you just learn, like sometimes you hear a concept for the first time and you start, like, thinking about it all the time. It's like figuring out how to be able to, like, specifically define a category, right? Because, like, when, like, a category includes a lot of people, and it's supposed to be vague to some extent because you're able to include lots of different things that probably in some ways are meaningfully different in between each individual part of the category. But, like, there's going to be unifying features within the category, right? And so, like, with gender, it's hard because gender is, like, this nebulous thing. Like, it is, like, this weird wibbly wobbly kind of. I actually don't watch Doctor Who. I just know the meme exists. There's this weird wibbly wobbly thing. But, like, there are ways, like especially in some of the literature, to be able to like kind of define it down, especially in a way that avoids like the biggest thing is you want to definitely like be able to address like really big like transphobic issues or like really transphobic interpretations or definitions, right? Like there are plenty of ways to do that. There's I can like off the top of my head, I've talked about this before. Like I like the definition I put forward because like I came to it and I feel like it is able to include. I feel like it's most supported by the literature. But I think that there's also like, for example, I don't know if you were listening, there's like a self-ID definition that I heard from someone who came on stream the other day, which I also think is really cool. And like, if people want to run with that one, then like, it's fine. It'll accomplish the goal of like having a self-ID definition that can work. And that makes sense logically.
Go back and look at the VOD to get the specific wording on that.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I remember, that VOD will come out tomorrow, and it's I'm trying to like basically the idea is such that like essentially so the problem with an infinite regress, and this is like putting it more into words. Maybe I could have used this better in the initial Demon Mama conversation. Is that like the problem with an infinite regress is that every person is every instance is basing itself off of another instance of itself. Which only makes sense in the context of self in the vacuum, not interpersonal. Well, actually, I'm not sure about that one. So basically, like, the idea that someone gave was that, like, if you take self-ID, so basically, I identify, so, like, a woman is someone who identifies as a woman. So what's the woman? Well, it's a woman woman is someone who identifies as a woman. Well, what's the woman? Well, it's a woman who self-identifies as a woman. And, like, if you just take that, it just goes on infinitely. It ends up being meaningless. But it stops being meaningless if you have some endpoint to the infinity, right? Like if you're able to pick like some point to end infinity, then suddenly it becomes meaningful. And so
there's like some theoretical woman, some Eve, who everyone is just copying.
Well, basically, I mean, like the idea essentially in this definition, and like you can elaborate more on this. This is just like a very basic idea, but like if you wanted to run with this, then like logically you could. Essentially, the idea is that like, so, like, if you wanted to, like, write this out, it would be a woman is someone who identifies as a woman except for the first woman or something like that, right? So, essentially, the idea would be, like, what you had was the first person. And, like, you know, if we go back far enough in time, like, gender and biological sex probably overlap so much that this person, like, let's just say, obviously, we've talked about biological sex as this wibbly-wobbly thing, but just for the sake of defining shorthand, let's just say biological female. Let's say that you had like biological female way back in the day, does not know the concept of gender. The concept of gender does not occur to this person's mind, but someone else looked at this person and began to like formulate this idea of like this very primordial concept of like womanhood in their mind. And like, it's going to be mostly just like according to physical characteristics, right? But maybe there are like some small things that don't exactly necessarily correlate with like the physical characteristics. Maybe they think, oh, this person is mother, this person is caretaker, this person is et cetera, right? Like these are qualities that probably overlap with like certain like biological functions that they had like back during survival, like back during like the beginning of humanity. But like there's some like then you get in the concept of like, well, what does it mean to be a mother? Well, a mother is a lot of things, right? Maybe a lover, maybe a mother brings on like kindness or gentleness or things like that, right? These are things which are not like necessarily like biologically intrinsic, right? Like a woman doesn't have to be kind, right? But like now we're starting to load other ideas in like this very primordial sense onto someone. And it's probably as a consequence of that initially, and then like the person who makes that categorization adopting that idea themselves, and then whoever comes after them adopting that idea, and then after them, so on and so forth. You have this idea that's carried over the whole course of history. Maybe there are some other genders that are invented, right? Somewhere along the way based off of other ways that other people interact, and you know, you need like new categorization for that. But like, that's essentially how you would resolve that issue if you just wanted, if you did want a self-ID definition, right?
I think it's still like a little wrong because you're losing, if it's just like all referential back to this idea of the first woman, you're still not really accurately with that definition accommodating all of the detail that's picked up along the way, because you're basically just then acknowledging still some instance of objective gender.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
which is like what's making that tricky.
Right. So I mean, like, no, and that's why I tend to, I mean, like, the thing about it is, like, I think I agree, and that's the reason I don't use it personally.
Yeah.
But like, oh, is Mark here? Hold on, I was supposed to do a dungeon with someone, I lost him. But basically, the idea is that like, how do I want to put it? It's a definition that is logically sound, or it's logically valid. It may not necessarily be logically sound, but it gets over at least the initial issue we were talking about. And so for people who feel very strongly about using that definition, I would say it doesn't necessarily, like, I would agree that it doesn't necessarily capture all the meaning that we end up finding and observing in the literature. But if you really want to use a self-ID definition, that's probably like
best way to do it.
That's the best way to do it. Yeah. And I'm not going to like get beat up over it if you really want to use that one, because like, even if I feel like it doesn't capture everything that we've observed in the literature, it's not going to run into the same kind of issues as what we were talking about before.
Yeah. Okay. So I have some specific questions about your definition.
All right. Yeah, go for it.
Statements of gender identity. Oh, sorry. Yeah, I know that statements of gender identity are objective gender, but where does conscious internal gender identity go? Does that factor in at all? I'm not sure if that does in your definition.
So, like, I think it does to some extent, right? So basically, here, let me go ahead and just bring it up. This is why you do docs, kids, so you can just have, like, pure consistency. Not have to, like, remember things off the top of your head. Okay.
It seems like it's kind of, like, not quite internal, but it's not meaningful to be the external objective.
Sure. So, like, essentially...
And then it's limbo.
Oh, hold on. Is my... Oh, crap. Is this breaking? Hold on. Is this just not... Oh, all right. Internet Explorer is just not working. Okay, that's cool. All right. Let me open up Chrome.
You're using Internet Explorer?
Or I'm using Microsoft Edge, sorry. Microsoft Edge isn't responding. Okay.
This is gonna get you canceled.
Yeah, I'm sorry. All right, hold on here. Let me open up Google Chrome. I hope that the stream... Hey, everyone, let me know if the stream just stops. That would be unfortunate, and I would be very sad. But, all right, here. Go to Twitter.
I think this is one of the biggest things that confused everybody, is not only are you not saying the defining trait is gender identity, which, like, I picked up on, not many people did, like the way you kind of split gender identity into unconscious, like, motives, and then, like, the actual, what you recognize out of that. And we're looking at the motives for internal. But I'm not sure if conscious gender identity then itself has any value in your model specifically, or if so, where it goes.
Let's see. I guess it technically doesn't in my model.
Okay.
I mean, like, it might. So, I mean, like, here, like, essentially the way that I see it, I guess that the reason why it doesn't necessarily factor into mine is because, like, I mean, like, it kind of does. I think that if we want to be, like, shorthand about it, and maybe I could have been clear on this. I think that, like, shorthand, if you just, like, internally self-identify as something and you tell someone else, like, hey, I identify as X, Y, or Z, then most people should just, like, accept that, like, practically speaking, and just, like, be like, okay, so that's your gender, I'm going to refer to you that, yada, yada. But the reason why I don't necessarily think that's what gender is because we get into problems of, like, the egg who can lie to themselves, and also, or I mean, like, I'm trying to think, there's another example. And, like, other forms of self-identity comparing to this, right? I use furries, maybe that was a bad example, but, like, basically...
I went through this whole thing. I talked for 2 days with chat and several people. The example you should have used is comparison to sexuality. Someone can, we all agree that gay is not a choice. Someone can be gay and repress it. So they objectively they live a straight life, but subjectively they're...
Yeah. Or sorry, go ahead.
So that was the clearest example I could find after trying for days.
No, you're probably right on that. I did think about that earlier today. I didn't think about that then, but I did definitely think about that, like, a little bit earlier today. Like, ooh, I wonder if I could have used, like, sexuality. Even then, like, nowadays, sexuality is changing up a little bit. Insofar as, like, I don't know, like, now the lines are starting to blur a little bit. Like, for example, when we're talking about, like, trans lesbians, all right, so what are you exactly attracted to when you're attracted to another woman? Well, what exactly does it mean to be attracted to a woman, or what is a woman? You get into all those issues, but then also, like, issues of, like, he, him lesbians also, like, especially, right? Where as far as I'm aware, or, like, bi lesbians, you know? Like, a lot of these are terms that are constantly shifting. Like, I think that we do want to argue that, like, I think I would make a very similar argument that essentially you're appealing to like some underlying like involuntary thought
Yeah.
process.
It works in that the parts that you need to make the metaphor work are pretty simple and commonly understood.
Yeah.
You don't want to go into the other mess that is defining what gay means really, but you say gay is not a choice. There's an underlying innate component. It is a choice to perform, i.e. make it your objective sexuality to live in denial. That's the cleanest metaphor.
Yeah, I think that's a really good way to be able to look at it, right? And so like for me, right, like when we're talking about like internal self-identity, to me that's really only like it's kind of like the bridge or like the middleman between like objectivity and subjectivity, right? Like you have these internal things, like these internal thought processes which motivate you to think in a certain way, and then eventually like in the same way that you can like breathe actively and like subconsciously breathe when you're asleep, you can choose to like actively breathe. All right, maybe this isn't like perfect for the analogy. You can choose to act on these involuntary thought processes, right? And you can actively choose to do something or interpret them in a certain way. Maybe you don't interpret them in the perfect way first. Maybe you experiment a little bit. Maybe you kind of like experiment like, all right, I'm feeling this way. Does this mean like this thing? Well, I only know a certain number, I only know genders X, Y, and Z. So like maybe I'll just go with the one that feels like the best. Oh, I tried it out. Doesn't exactly feel great. Oh, well, maybe I'll do some more research. Oh, there's actually another kind of gender that actually feels a lot better for me. And I'll try that out. Oh, this actually feels a lot better, right? Like I feel like this is how self-expression ends up manifesting a lot of the time. Where it's like essentially people just kind of like try a lot of different things, or maybe they have like no internal self-feeling. Maybe they're actually just sitting back like, actually, you know what? I just feel like a void. I feel like a black void of nothingness, and I don't, and fuck gender. Well, then they're probably going to try out a lot of different objective expressions until they figure out, actually, I just want to express as the void. I don't really care. It's just kind of whatever. Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of addressed my second question, which was, how does anyone determine their subjective gender, where you can't ever really be sure, but you can kind of experiment and just try to get at this idea?
Yeah.
But then, like, the related question to that is, if it can't really fully be determined, how does subjective gender practically matter? Kind of an existential, empirical question. Like, if it's something that's fundamentally unknowable, why does it matter at all to define?
Yeah, I think that it's just like essentially it's kind of like a placeholder for understanding that there's like some kind of like fundamental feeling, right? Because it seems to me that like not only is that consistent with the literature, but also that like that seems to be the experience of like every trans person, regardless of like literally any gender identity. Like any gender identity is essentially just like the pursuit of like trial and error of trying to get as close to what this is for us. I mean, like, it's going to be like a really far-reaching nebulous concept, right? Like the human brain is super duper complex. Like we're all probably going to have like some variation thereof of like what this feeling is for us. For a lot of people, it's probably going to mean broadly the same thing. A lot of people are cis. Most people are cis. So most people are probably just going to kind of go along with what they were assigned at birth and be like, all right, this is fine. I'm happy with it. But, obviously that's not going to be the same way for a lot of people, for, a sizable portion of people. And for those people, I'd say it's more just a matter of like trial and error, Like we don't want to like there's probably not going to be like a brain scan to figure out exactly what you are. And if there is, like, I feel like it would end up just being like more of like a spectrum, or it wouldn't give you like a lot of really specific information anyway. I think it's just important to be able to be like, all right, what's my internal like thermometer feeling, and like, based on it, like,
yeah,
if I try
like hot or colder,
yeah. Is this feeling hot? Like, am I feeling like super? Like, if I go out and I make expressions X, Y, and Z, like, is that super spicy? Like, is that super good? No. Okay, I'm gonna try something else. Oh, I tried this other thing and I really like it. Oh, I should probably go along with it. You could say that those are like examples of like, for example, like gender dysphoria and euphoria. You try out something, you learn that you really don't like it, and it's like, oh, damn, gender dysphoria. Like, I really don't like that. Then you try out something else, and you're like, oh, wow, I really like this. Like, this feels super good. Gender euphoria. Someone misgenders you and doesn't treat you great. Gender dysphoria. This is also, like, I'm realizing as I'm saying it, this is kind of why, to me, like, the necessity, like, the subjective aspect is necessary. Because, like, otherwise, I'm pretty sure that, like, how you're actually treated in society starts to not mean as much, because like misgendering we acknowledge as a harm, right? We shouldn't misgender people. Misgendering is bad, right? Because it causes a harm. To me, what causes the harm is that like it essentially is like specifically trying to prod at this internal feeling and try to elicit like a very specific response out of that, right? Because I'm not sure if you had like this feeling that if that prodding was not made in such a way, then you wouldn't elicit that kind of response, right? Then we would just say like, oh, actually, because like, we can misgender whoever because actually it doesn't matter because no one has like some kind of internal feeling that says that like this is a kind of harm that would be done.
Yeah, so one big point that I think like will help a lot of people like watching this later is subjective gender was misinterpreted to mean dysphoria, and that's why people kind of had a reductive trans medicalist view. But in your model, dysphoria is not the internal thought process that constitutes subjective gender and drives objective gender. Dysphoria in your model is the distress caused in some by a difference between one's subjective gender and objective gender.
Yeah, or like that would be an example, right?
Yeah, that's like the best I could put it. Like dysphoria is that these things are out of sync.
Yeah, no, and like that's essentially
being subjective gender.
Yeah, no, I'd agree with that. And similarly, right, like when these things are together, then you can experience gender euphoria. Now, some people might not feel gender dysphoria that much because of however like their brain is wired. Maybe like they just don't, or like for whatever reason, maybe they don't feel as much like gender dysphoria from feeling out of sync, but maybe they feel like a lot of gender euphoria from having those things more in sync, right?
Yeah, these things are required, but these are a reaction to subjective and objective gender being out of sync or in sync.
Yeah.
It's like a reaction to that. Yeah, okay. And that in that way makes it incredibly easy to like explain conceptually what that is, what that means.
Yeah. And I would also say probably that just based on our observations in the world, that these are, it's like, for example, like dysphoria, euphoria, similar kinds of feelings. I would probably say that they are like a sufficient criteria and not necessary, whereas sufficient, like by virtue of having this quality, that means that you are in the group. That's what sufficient means, but it's not the only thing that can tell you that you're a part of a group. Whereas a necessary category is whereas a necessary quality, that means that you have to have this quality, and that's the only way that you're going to be able to be in the group, right? Or it's like you need it in order to be in the group, right? So like if you have dysphoria, like you're like that probably means that you're trans, but it's not the only way to tell that you're trans, right? You can feel gender euphoria, and that can also tell you, or like some other similar feeling thereof, right? Like
these are both reactions of basically you experiment with objective gender. And then based on how that makes you feel, which could be some degree of dysphoria or euphoria, that helps you deductively inform yourself about your subjective gender.
Yeah.
That's how these ideas connect. And it's a very clean cut when when dysphoria is not understood to be subjective gender, but to be like one thing that could happen to some people based on how the two relate to each other.
Yeah. No, I
think that clears up a lot.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good way to be able to look at it. RGR, sometimes there's just no stress when you have disconnect at all, which leads to less or no dysphoria. Well, I mean, like, yeah, that's fine. I mean, we were just talking about earlier, right? Like, if you don't feel that kind of a distress, well, there's probably, like, some other feeling there, maybe. Like, you're probably going to have, like, some feeling. There's some feeling which tells you, like, oh, yeah, this expression is the one that I want to go with, right? Whether or not it's, like, maybe, like, a little bit of euphoria, maybe it's a little bit of dysphoria. Like, there's something that makes you, like, want to do that, And it's, like, that desire, that want, like, that comes from some kind of innate feeling, whether it's, like, negative or positive. Whatever that motivation is, like, there's something, It's not like people it's not like any of us just, like, make these choices for absolutely no reason. That's kind of the idea.
One of my last big confusing questions is sorry, I'm trying to find it. Is stated gender identity not the overall determining factor in objective gender identity already?
Oh wait, hold on. Wait, say that again, because I think that I think there's something really cool here. But yeah, can you say that again?
Isn't stated gender identity already the determining factor of objective gender, such as a butch woman being an objective woman because she says she's a woman?
I would say it's not, but we want it to be. And that's the goal of
Got
activism.
It.
Yep. So basically,
yeah.
So basically, like, essentially, and essentially, like, the idea, so self-identification, a goal in society for, like, activism, and this is the reason why I really like Discord as an example, is essentially that, like, what we want to do is we want to move the world to where the world is like Discord. Because in Discord, notice that, so I'm going to pull the definition back up. I'm sorry, there's someone in ESO who wants to play with me, but like this is like the coolest application of this, right? This is where I actually was talking to someone last night, and I realized that like this actually might unironically be like a formula to achieving gender abolitionism, and I'm going to explain it.
Yeah. No, I totally understood this. I wrote this down. I was like, oh, is gender abolition at odds with this? And I realized this is exactly, okay, so I'm onto your position.
Yeah. So essentially, like, what happens is, so if you look at Discord, right? In Discord, the only sufficient criteria, or the primary sufficient criteria for being, like, so for example, if we're looking at, like, if we're looking at the totality of one's social expressions, the average reasonable person's interpretations of those expressions, and the average reasonable person's categorization one based on those interpretations, well, we're looking, like, when we're talking about the average reasonable person in the Discord, we're just talking about, like, the people in that space, right? We're just talking about people there. And so there's this question of, okay, so when we're in a Discord, what are the social expressions that people can make to have, like, in order for other people to recognize them as a gender? And by and large, everyone, especially in, like, a trans-friendly Discord, especially in my Discord, if you are following the rules, recognizes that self-identification, specifically picking up a pronoun role, is the only is basically, like, the only kind of, like, if you were to make that expression and nothing else, like, literally you just, like, form a new Discord account and you have no picture on it and just says user 0001, and you picked up a she, her pronoun role, everyone would look at you and categorize you as a woman or some variation thereof, right? Like, someone who uses she, her pronouns. And that's really cool, right? Because we've constructed this laboratory space where effectively the objective expression of gender and the subjective are so close that they are essentially one and the same. It's just because, but the reason why is because we have moved the average reasonable person's understanding of the sufficient criteria to be categorized in a gender. And this is what I would say is the good thing to do for society. Is what we should do is, while this may not be the case right now, because if you have, like there are plenty of examples, we can observe this in society where butch women may they may look like a man for whatever reason. They may, like, go out into society, and even though you and I know that subjectively, and they would be true, even though that you and I know that subjectively they are a woman, and they may go into, like, more conscientious spaces, and they will be in those spaces treated as a woman. In a lot of spaces in society, they won't be, right? Because we live in a society where the average reasonable person broadly may not look at them and treat them in the way that they want to be treated. And so the goal for activists, and I say this, like, Rose of Dawn in the back of my head is, like, using this term disparately. I'm using it sincerely, right? Where we want to, like, actually have trans activists actively pushing the definition of what it means to be a gender closer to self-identification for the average population, so that eventually, in society, the average reasonable person's only sufficient criteria for being a gender is self-identification. You have created a tautology because everyone agrees on it. And at that point, because it's a tautology, now it loses all meaning. Congratulations, you have simultaneously abolished gender, and you also have made sure that everyone is included in their gender identity.
So yeah, I actually wrote something pretty much exactly like this. Gender abolition works with this framework. The goal of trans advocacy, culminating in gender abolition, is breaking down the societal qualifiers for objective gender until stating your gender is the qualifier for objective gender. This allows anyone to easily find harmony with their subjective gender. Any validated sense of self with any performative expression still respected as desired. This is trans liberation.
Yep. There you go.
Okay.
We've cracked the code. And this, if we do this, we will this is the key. Like, I said it before at the end of my stream, but I was crying when I said it. But seriously, this is the key. These are the keys to the kingdom right here.
Yeah, and so I think the one thing, the other side, was that the absurd look at what is objective gender, not gender, from the opposition, comes from this kind of idea that the aggregate set of people being used to construct a definition of objective gender is being used as literally all women through all history, at which a range at which it is absurd and the commonalities are so poor that literally there is no other, like, use to it besides self-identification.
Yeah.
And that's why I think that's a uselessly large set.
Yeah, no, and I mean, like, I tend to agree. That's the reason that I don't use it personally, and also because, like, pursuant to the conversation that we just had, I really like this definition because it gives us, like, information on what to do to be able to, like, accomplish what we are looking to do, especially in terms of, like, trans liberation, right? but like the reason I bring up that definition is because I like the self-identification definition, even if it works logically. The reason I bring it up is because like if people feel so strongly about having like a self-ID definition that works, just because like this is a very emotional subject, then like people are free to. That's like a way to make it work. But like this is pretty cool. I think that like this definition is pretty cool because like it's operative and it tells us exactly what to do to accomplish what we are looking to do.
It's that self-ID should be one and the same with objective gender. That is the goal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so the last point I have is that it was great talking with you on these terms, but legal language does not seem to work. From everyone I talked to, the biggest points of confusion were the terms objective and subjective, and I wrote down a few potential alternatives for each.
Okay.
So objective gender could also be understood as external, performed, operant, or received gender. And subjective gender could be internal, underlying, innate gender, or gender feels.
Yeah, no, I feel like those terms could work. So like again,
send those in your chat.
Yeah, so I mean, like, I don't know. I'll have to revise the doc. So basically, like, I like using the terms because I feel like, for me, they help organize in the way that I understand them. Like, but again, like, I'm not saying that people, like, I'm not proposing my definition like it's the end all be. So, like, essentially, I probably will revise my doc to have, like, an asterisk that, like, hey, these are other ways to be able to use this language. Or maybe I'll have, like, the subjective, objective in, like, a footnote, or we'll figure it out.
I think that the two should be in separate bullet points rather than conflated, because what seemed to happen in the debate, based on the chats, was you had them both in one paragraph of text. Everyone read objective first and then got offended before realizing that subjective was a different definition that relates to it. Like the two kind of got blurred together. People only saw one half of it.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, and then I think you need examples with like each type of person, from like a basic cis man to like a femboy to a trans man who doesn't know it yet. You need to do each step of the way. This is what their subjective gender is. This is what their objective gender is.
Yeah.
In these examples, it was too abstract.
Right. Well, I mean, like here, I don't know. It's also hard because like I do try to condense it all down in the one page, just because like that's not just a gimmick. Like I think it's good to like have I feel like it's a good practice, because then it forces you to really think about an idea before you codify it, because like in order to be able to convey something with like a limited amount of space, you really have to understand it well. Like you have to understand it as like you have to understand exactly the idea that you're trying to convey, and you have to understand all the different ways of conveying that idea as efficiently as possible. So I mean, like, I'll definitely include it. But I mean, like, as far as like examples, I've definitely thought about like all the different like possible ways to be able to present that, right?
It may need its own one-page document or a short kind of prepared video explaining this with examples. And you should do that, but I'm certainly going to do it over the next week, because I've put in a lot of effort understanding this. Yeah. And I'm going to get something out of it.
Well, I mean, like, if you want to, and if it's good, then like let me know, and I can watch it on stream and also promote you, because that would certainly be useful and helpful. Great,
cool. So I'll totally work on that this week. Because it's very clear once I like logically got into the headspace, but there are lots of hurdles to do that. Mm-hmm. And I think definitely explaining using like just being gay is not a choice is a super easy example, and dysphoria is not the same thing as subjective gender, but one potential relationship between the two. Like there is some little details, but cool. Yeah. So awesome.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey. Are there any other questions? Because we just unlocked. Also, I just had this conversation with someone last night. Like basically the exact same conversation. And it is really it is really cool. All right, hold on, Mark, I'm gonna take you. All right, so but yeah, are there any other questions, concerns, etc. that you got?
I think that's it. And I think you saw Pink Wug's document explaining about Pink Wug's like diagram using Star Wars as an example. That's super helpful.
Yeah, so I mean, like I think that's mostly right. I think that, so Pink Wug sent it to me earlier. I don't think I've shown chat it, so I'm not sure how many of them are aware. Basically, it's like using the example of a Star Wars fan.
Yeah, I have the link here on my notes page.
Yeah, I mean, like, it's definitely useful. I think that Pink Wug switched objective and subjective, which I mean, that's fine. It's just like a recognition, or at least when Pink Wug sent it to me. And then like, I think it essentially captures. All right, here.
Document.
Yeah. People can load up. Was a Star Wars fan. Okay, yeah, Pinkwug amended this. Some mental processes that make them enjoy Star Wars can lie. Certain mental processes. Oh yeah, no, Pinkwug. Yeah, no, this is exactly it. Yep. All right, cool. Pinkwug adopted the
Pretty based.
Yeah. I mean, I really like it. I don't know, Pinkwug. It also probably helps because I know that Pinkwug is also. I believe that Pinkwug is trans and also is a law student, or just passed the bar. It's some combination. So, Pinkwug probably is on a very similar page as I am, which is nice. But yeah, no, I think that's like very. Yeah, no, I think that's a very useful way to be able to look at this. You could also just refer to gender expression. Yeah, you could also like I know that like the easiest way to be able to do it would be like gender expression, gender identity. The only reason I don't use gender identity is just because like again,
it's not gender identity.
Yeah, like we
I
just want to
spent
make
4 hours realizing you didn't mean gender identity.
Yeah. Like
It
we
makes
want
a lot of sense.
Yeah, exactly. Like when we say gender identity, most people will accept that like, oh, so just like conscious self ID, right? And it's like, no, I think that they're slightly different than that. And that was like a whole big part of the conversation. So like that's the reason I don't generally use that. But I mean like the other terms that you presented, like those sound like they would work reasonably well.
Cool.
Cool.
So yeah, thank you so much for clarifying. Now I've completed my understanding.
No problem.
And I'm gonna take a nap.
All right, sounds good. And
No.
yeah, and then I don't know, if I'll see you later in the chat, then I'll see you whenever. Bye.
Cool. Bye.